Hello and welcome. Today I've come on to talk about change. Change is something that is going to get thrown in our lives over and over and over again. How we deal and manage that change that comes into our life is completely up to us. When I think about the topic of change, it's basically one of the most integral components of life. Everything that you see around you is changing. Now, our mind, when we look at something, we think, the chair in this chair is not changing, but everything is in constant motion and it's actually changing. We just don't see those changes. Now, the changes that I want to speak about today are some of the changes that come into our lives, changes that we want to make, and some of the changes that are forced upon us. In my life, there was a very long period of time where I slowly changed. As a young man, I was so passionate, and I was gentle, I was kind. I remember one time standing in front of my mom's record player, listening to a song, and I'm crying. I could feel every word of what was being said in that music, and I'm sitting there crying, and my mom says, "What's the matter, Ned?" And I said, "It's just a sad song, Mommy. It's just a really sad song." So when I think back of that, that's a beautiful moment. I was just expressing what I felt. But as I got older, I stopped being so vulnerable. I started to reach only into one emotion instead of reaching into a whole range of emotions. This became very problematic for me. As I got older, I thought, as a boy, I'm not supposed to have certain feelings. And it only seemed to be acceptable if I was angry. And so that's what I became. I became very angry, and I'd insert anger into just about everything. If I was embarrassed, I'd be angry. Or if I stubbed my toe, I'd be angry. If I was a jerk to my partner, I'd get angry. And again, that's the exact opposite thing that you want to do if you've just been unkind to somebody, is to add anger on top of it. So I knew I needed to change. And the changes that I tried to make these changes, and it seemed like I was just fumbling, and I would revert back to my old ways, and I couldn't seem to change the stick. Over time, as I started to grow and evolve and look inward and take a little bit more self-reflection, those changes did happen for me. And they started to take place very slowly, and then over time the changes were made. But when I look at the anatomy of change, like, how did I change? I think that's a really fundamental question. How did I go from being angry to being able to really manage how I feel, and better yet, being able to express how I feel no matter what those emotions are? And so when I looked back at it, I thought I could see where there's like 3 different phases that I move through when I'm going through a change. The first phase is the awareness. We become aware that there's something that needs to change. So it's like the idea. When I look at my behaviors and I notice that I'm constantly going to one emotion, now I'm aware. And in that awareness, that's the very beginning stage. That awareness, we're faced with a decision. Am I willing to change, or am I not willing to change? And if we're not willing to change, then there's a good chance we're just going to stay stuck in those behaviors. And I think life becomes redundant. If our lives played out like how our minds think it should, every day would be Groundhog Day. We would just be doing the same things, acting the same way, maybe visiting the same friends. Change would never come into our lives. But that's the most brilliant thing about change, is that it changes, it not only we change ourselves, but we change our entire life. So once I decided that I had an awareness that I needed to change, and then I was willing to make that change, I was able to move into the next step. And so what I see the next step is my acceptance of change. Now in my awareness and my willingness, that's sort of the phase where you start making plans. Okay, I realize I'm behaving a certain way. I'm going to try to notice that I'm doing that. And you make a plan. As soon as I notice, I'm going to set that down. Or whatever it is you want to change, you start making plans in that awareness phase. And then when you are ready and you're willing to make that change, when you actually move into the acceptance phase, that's where we implement the plan that we have to make the change. Now, so we've got 2 steps. The last step is devotion. Now, the acceptance phase is a very short phase, the putting something in place. Because as soon as we decide that we're going to put that plan in place, we now have to stick with it. We have to get real dedicated to the change that we would like to make. So when I call it specifically the devotion phase, because devotion and dedication are 2 different things. And I talked about this in my book, Be Love. I talked about, say you have a goal, and the goal is in your mind, that's the finish line. Dedication can get you to that goal. If you stay dedicated the whole time, you will probably get to that goal. But when you apply devotion is everything that dedication is, with the inclusion of love. When you start to bring love into things that you're dedicated to, now your goal is actually the minimum that you think you can achieve. And when we're truly devoted, when we're applying love to the changes that we want to make in our lives, our goal, like I say, is the minimum, and we actually start reaching into our potentials. And our potential in life is way past any finish line, quitting point, any goal that we set for ourselves. And that's been something that's been very self-evident to me as I've set goals and then got real devoted to them and added my devotion, added love into what I'm doing. It helped me go way beyond any finish line or quitting point, or just obtaining that goal. So again, the 3 phases of making change is the awareness, the acceptance of that change, and then the dedication with love. And so how do we really love, the process of making a change? Sometimes it's found in being kind and gentle with yourself as you're going through these changes that you want to make. Like for instance, when I was struggling with my emotions of anger, if I got angry, there came a point where I stopped getting mad at myself for getting angry. I started to just say, okay, I've noticed now, and I'm going to set it down now. Whenever I did notice that I was moving into that place, that was the moment that I could start loving myself. And if you want to make a change, say you want to get into photography, every time you make a mistake with something, look at it as an opportunity to grow. Every picture that you take, pour love into it, get real present, and throw your heart and soul into something. That's being devoted. I've been doing that for years with my tattooing, and there's been phases where I'm not so devoted, and I'm getting the job done, doing the best I can. But in those phases where I got real devoted and I started to really pour love into the work, there's just such a noticeable change. And because the thing about love is that it sort of mega evolves anything that we do. Now, change, because it's I think it's an integral aspect of life, I think change gets us a little further into our purpose. It switches things up for us. And how change brings purpose in our lives is it allows us to flow with life. Quite often, if we're regimented, we get up in the morning, we have our coffee, and we have a set of rules that life has to follow for us to be happy. If we're so regimented and we can't manage or handle any change that comes to our day, we may be missing so many opportunities that are flowing to us. Because this life that we're living is like a 1,000-lane highway of creation. And it's flowing around us every second of every day. There's all the things that I've created in my life. There's all the things that others are in the midst of creation. So there's just massive highway of creation flowing through us. And how is that ever going to conform to make life exactly as it was yesterday? Life is never going to be what it is yesterday, but sometimes when we're unable to change, we're unable to embrace change, we just want to repeat yesterday. So life gets more purposeful and on point because our purpose is not actualized through doing the same thing day in, day out. Our purpose is landing at our feet. Every moment of every day, there's purpose landing at your very feet. And this is a concept I talk about in my book, Be Love. I talk about purpose is not one giant thing, rather it's a live feed. And life is a live feed. And that's why being able to flow with the live feed that's happening around us will make life a lot more joyful for us. And it gets us into all kinds of interesting experiences. It certainly has for me. Flowing against life is kind of like jumping in a boat and paddling upstream, paddling the opposite way the current is running. And being able to flow with change is like turning the boat around. As soon as you turn that boat around, the water does all the work. You paddle to steer the boat. And I really feel that that's what our lives could be. And that's how my life has certainly been in the process of becoming. More often than not, I'm just steering the boat. I'm not fighting with life. I'm not trying to paddle upstream. And it certainly takes a lot less effort to do so. Now, the last piece that I wanted to talk about with change is how it changes. One small change can make a monumental shift in our life. And we tend to think of our life as, this live feed that's moving in a linear process. We go from A to B to C. But one small little change in your life can have such huge ramifications. And if you watch the news, you'll see that with somebody that's been a criminal. One change, their life is over. But the changes, even little changes you make in our life, changes your trajectory. So trajectory is if I was standing at the edge of a field and I looked directly across the field, where I was pointed, and if I just kept walking straight to where I was pointed, I'd end up on the opposite side of the field. Now, if I'm standing at an edge of a field and I make 1 degree of change, if I just turn my head just ever so slightly to the right, and then I start walking, by the time I got to the end of the field, I'd be a long ways off from center. And the further we go in our lives, the further we can move left or right or left. Don't know which hand I got here. So it's important to realize these little subtle changes that we make can move us a very long ways. So by embracing change and understanding what change is, it helps us It helps us to move through our lives with way less struggle. I think it's an important topic that we look at. What's happening in your life that's good? What's happening that's not good? What do you want to change? What are the changes that have been forced upon you that you have no other option to accept? Certainly, there's been a lot of changes recently that a lot of people don't want to have with the current situation in the world with COVID. There's been a lot of change being thrown upon us. And our ability to flow with it and accept it helps us to reach into a more creative and purposeful life, even in the midst of change. Your changes can stifle you, they can crumble you, but the most important thing that if I could convey about change is to look at change and apply this 3-step process. Become aware of what needs to change or what has changed. Bring some acceptance into it and find devotion for the plan that you want to put in place. And allow change to be something that perpetuates your growth. Because there's such a huge component to some of the changes that come that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. Like if somebody's going through a divorce or they suddenly lose their home. These are definitely changes that we wouldn't choose in our life. But some of these disastrous type changes can be a very strong catalyst for our growth. How much can you grow from your change? How much can you accept your change? I challenge you to look deeply into that. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day. Thanks for listening. Take care.